Thank you for being here. I'm Jenny Beth Martin with Tea Party Patriots. 2 years ago today, Tea Party Patriots, along with a huge coalition of other groups, were out here as the House voted for the Obamacare legislation for the final time. And we had about 40,000 people here over the weekend, 40 to 50,000 people. There were people standing outside right down there until 11 o'clock at night when this law was passed out of the House for the last time. At the time it was passed, over 50% of Americans, 60% of the Americans did not want this bill passed into law, but Congress passed it anyway. Today, polling shows time after time after time that the majority of Americans still do not want this to be law. They do not want the government to control their health care, and they want this legislation repealed. We hear them, and we say it's time to repeal the bill. Obamacare is a cancer, and it's time to rip it out. Thank you.
Jenny Beth, I'm Congressman Tom Price. I represent the 6th District of Georgia and also a physician. And I want to thank Jenny Beth Martin and the Tea Party Patriots and all the individuals who have continued to keep the fire of freedom alive. As Jenny Beth mentioned, 2 years ago, we were right here. And we were saying to the President and saying to the Democrats in charge at that time that the American people understood that this bill is destructive. This law is destructive to the health care of this country. And we said, don't do it. And instead, they rammed it down the throats of the American people. They said at the time that it would grow in its popularity and the American people would understand and appreciate the wisdom of what they had done. In fact, what has happened because of Tea Party Patriots and so many other individuals across this great land is that they've recognized that the bill is violative of every single principle we hold dear in health care. Whether it's accessibility, which should increase and is decreasing because of the bill. Whether it's affordability, which should be decreasing, instead it's increasing because of the bill. Whether it's quality in healthcare, which should be increasing but is decreasing because of the bill. American people understand that. And next week in the Supreme Court across the street, they will recognize that as well. And I believe over the next number of months recognize that the individual mandate is unconstitutional. So as Jenny Beth says, it's time to repeal the bill. It's time to tear up the bill. It's time to end the disaster of the President's health care bill.
Thanks, Tom, Jenny Beth, and everybody that's here this morning. I see Michelle Bachmann arrive here at the press conference, and I think of what we were doing 2 years ago today. After many of us and thousands of Americans, in fact, tens of thousands of Americans, came here to this city to say to their legislators, keep your hands off of my health care and our Constitution. For the only time that I can determine in the history of America, this Capitol building was surrounded by people. Tens of thousands of people were here 2 years ago today, and it wasn't just a human chain around the Capitol, it was a human donut. They were 6 and 8 thick, hands joined all the way around with thousands of people inside on the curves without a hand to reach to. Think of that image. There's not a picture because you can't fly a helicopter above this Capitol building, but I walked these grounds, a human donut around here saying keep your hands off of our health care and our Constitution. Piece after piece, we know how bad this is. I don't have to go down through the list. It's unaffordable, unsustainable, unconstitutional. The Supreme Court will get a look at this later on this month, and I hope to be there to hear that argument. But the point, and I wanted to actually go find page 666, but I don't think I'll dig that deep in there. Somebody will get around to that. If we turn the American people loose to come tear these pages off, they would tear every page out of there, and there'd be people standing in line to do that. But that night, I walked home. I thought I could sleep. I couldn't. I did what Michelle Bachmann did. I drafted a bill to repeal Obamacare, and the last words of hers and mine are identical, and they are this: repeal the bill as if it had never been enacted. Close quote.
All right. I'm Congressman John Fleming. I'm a physician from Minden, Louisiana. I was here during the health care debate, and of course, we're at the 2-year mark after its passage. And history has proven Republicans and the Tea Party right on this issue, because as you know, first of all, 57% of Americans want it repealed and want it repealed immediately. But secondly, all the great promises that came with it have been proven to be broken already. The president said that your cost would go down $2,500 a year, and in fact, it's gone up that much, a spread of $5,000. He said that it would help pay down the deficit, but what's happened? The estimates now are around $500 billion over the first 10 years will be added to our national debt. He said that it would be paid for, and he also said that it would cost something less than $1 trillion over 10 years, and the facts are now it will be more like $2 trillion. And then finally, the president guaranteed us that we could all keep the health care plan that we have today, and now by the White House's own estimates, 80% of Americans will lose their current health care. So I join my friends and colleagues today to rip up this crazy Obamacare law, and we promise, we commit to the American people that we will replace it with common sense reform. Thank you.
Good morning. Dr. Phil Gingrey from Marietta, Georgia, the 11th Congressional District. I stand here very proud this morning with my colleagues of the Tea Party caucus in the House of Representatives, which we formed a couple of years ago. The organizing group of about 20, led by our great friend Michelle Bachmann, and of course here also with Jenny Beth Martin of the Tea Party Patriots. We're going to have a big vote on the House floor tomorrow in regard to repealing one very, very egregious section of Obamacare and those 2,700 pages, and that's called IPAB. You know all about that, and I think you know the reasons why. IPAB, quite honestly, is the only thing that the president has offered the seniors in this country in the way of Medicare reform. Medicare reform by rationing their care. That's his idea of reform. After taking $500 billion out of the Medicare program to pay for this new entitlement program called Obamacare. I don't know whether to tear this page up, this summary page of Obamacare. I've made it into the form of a little paper airplane. I might take a chance and fly it toward the Supreme Court, but of course I don't know the way the wind's blowing this morning, so I'm not going to take a chance on that, so I better just go ahead and tear it up here and now be done with it. Thank you.
I'm Joe Barton from Texas. We have a lot of Tea Party challengers around the country that are running to help clean up Congress and to help reform the country. But there's some of us that are Tea Party congressmen and were Tea Party before Tea Party was cool. There is no clearer example of the Obama overreach than the health care law that passed 2 years ago on this day. And we are absolutely dedicated, those of us that are in the Tea Party caucus, to repealing this bill all at once if possible, and if not, piece by piece. And as Dr. Gingrey just said, today and tomorrow on the House floor, we're going to be debating and then voting, hopefully affirmatively, to repeal the IPAB board, which is one of the more egregious examples of overreach by the Obama administration. So I'm proud to be a part of the Tea Party caucus, and I am absolutely proud to be a part of tearing this bill apart.
Good morning. I'm Dr. Paul Gosar, one of the 2 dentists on the Doctors Caucus, and I'm here on behalf of the Tea Party. They got me through that election. And one of the principal issues was Obamacare, and that's exactly what they wanted repealed. Sitting at the chair side for the last 25 years, I know how healthcare is delivered. It's between a doctor and the patient. And this IPAB board that we're going to repeal from the House tomorrow is a very important step in getting back to that patient-doctor relationship. So I'm very, very proud to be able to sit here with my colleagues today to rip this up and get back to the basics of reforming this healthcare system. So thank you very, very much for coming out, and let's get back to the work of getting back to a real conscientious reform.
Well, it was November, about 2.5 years ago, when Michelle Bachmann called for an emergency house call up here at the Capitol so that Americans could let the president know, and those who were in the majority in Congress at the time, but in the minority of the American people, to let them know that this was not a bill that needed to be passed. We could read it. Many of us did actually read this bill. We know the Speaker Pelosi did not. She needed to pass it to find out what was in it. But some of us read it, and it was scary to the American people. It was scary as with regard to what it did to our rights. People came up here. It was no mystery to the majority that in Congress that most people didn't want this. We heard the president, as you've heard, the president said, if you like your health care, you're going to get to keep it. You like your doctor, you're going to get to keep it. We know under the rules of the House, the president would never lie, but whoever put those words in his teleprompter was lying because it was just wrong. And now we found out 80% of Americans will not be keeping their health care. It is a disaster, just as we tried to explain and the majority of the American people tried to explain. This was not a bill that America should have. And if there was any doubt, I am grateful to the president that he would come out before the Supreme Court rules and make it clear that the president knows that this bill allows him to tread on religious freedom within the Constitution. So I would hope that liberal friends across the country that originally bought into the lies that were told about how good this was going to be will rise up and realize, think about this, if the President of the United States is authorized under this bill to tread on a stated religious freedom in the First Amendment, just think about what a really redneck president could do to privacy rights that are not even stated in the Constitution. The president can overstep and tread over your First Amendment rights, then he can certainly overstep all kinds of other rights. And the Supreme Court needs to know that. And they need to know that if they are not going to hold this unconstitutional bill unconstitutional, then the day that a president of the United States uses this, because it does give you the authority to invade people's bedrooms, to invade the doctor-patient relationship, to invade all kinds of relationships, because let's face it, the federal government gets to control your health care. They will have every right to tell you what you can eat, whether or not you can smoke, whether or not you're exercising enough. They will have all those rights because they control health care. This is such a devastating blow to the freedoms that so many fought for. And as Dennis Miller said, if our original founders would go to war over a tax on their breakfast drink, what do you think they would do about something this ridiculous? So I'm proud to be here with my friends, and I want to mention one other thing. The Tea Party Patriots with other Tea Party groups will be gathering Saturday. There will be events during the next week. But if anybody wants to come up here and once again make clear to the Supreme Court how strongly, this isn't even the tyranny of the majority. This is a minority of Americans that are taking over people's lives with this bill, and it's got to be stopped. And that's why some want to nip around the edges. It needs to be destroyed. It needs to be ripped up. And then we get real health care reform that people deserve. Thank you.
Way to go. Thank you so much for being here today. We're here because this is the signature piece of legislation of Barack Obama's term as President of the United States. Obamacare defines the Obama presidency, and it is the #1 reason why Barack Obama should not be returned to office for a second term. Not only did he fail to listen to the American people, he made promise after promise about this legislation that we know are patently false. Everything from the fact that he said that the average American household would save $2,500 per household on health insurance. Absolute falsehood. We're seeing prices skyrocket for people when it comes to health care. There's also a survey that was done for physicians. Physicians, 46% said once Obamacare is instituted, they will seriously look at leaving the profession, just when we need 165,000 more physicians in the system. President Obama also said, as my colleague said, that if you go into Obamacare, you will not lose your health insurance policy. And yet there was a study that came out before the bill passed that said that upwards of 114 million Americans could lose their health insurance policy. So rather than more people having health insurance, the bottom line will be fewer people have health insurance. And so we're here today to challenge all of you in the media. Tell the truth about Obamacare. Tell the American people the truth of what you're hearing today. We had 40,000 Americans come to this Capitol to say, please, Congress, don't pass Obamacare. We don't want this legislation. Normally, when a big bill like this goes through, people start to drift toward it and they like the bill. What we're finding is that more Americans than ever are very unhappy with Obamacare, particularly senior citizens. Why? They recognize they're the first ones on the front lines of denial. Not only did President Obama steal over $500 billion out of Medicare to put into Obamacare, but senior citizens recognize that under the IPAB board, they will be the first ones who are denied care in the future. We're standing here as members of Congress. Many of us are physicians, or many of us are related to health care. We know what's going to happen to health care. The finest health care system in the world will be dismantled. And so we're standing here four square, strongly, saying this has got to go. And yes, I was the first member of Congress to introduce the repeal bill. Steve King was the second member of Congress to introduce the repeal bill. The American people expect no less. They want this bill repealed, and we're standing here today to say, American people, the President of the United States down the street at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue may not be listening to you, but we in Congress have not forgotten you. We're listening. We're not giving up until we full square repeal this bill. God bless you. Tell the truth, media, about this bill. And we'll open it up for questions. And before we open up for questions, we're going to let Diana and Kelly speak. Come on, girls. We need you, girls.
Introduce yourself, Diana Reimer, Tea Party Patriots, Pennsylvania. We were here 2 years ago fighting for our rights. We're here again. This bill needs to be repealed, and we're not going to stop fighting. And I thank God for these great patriots in Congress that are fighting with us. Thank you.
My name is Kelly Carrender, and I'm the Legislative Coordinator for Tea Party Patriots. And I just have two quick messages. First is to the American people that this year is our last year to get rid of this awful, awful piece of legislation before it gets fully implemented. So let's stand up together and let's do that. And the second message is to the President and to the members of Congress that think this is a good idea. I'll be here for about a week. If you want to come find me, look me in the eye and tell me that you have the right to tell me what to do with my body, then let's arrange that and we'll get some of you guys there to film it, because we're repealing this thing.
I'm so glad they were up here talking, because this is the face of the American people. They were here from the very beginning, and that's one of the most, I think, the strongest enabling acts of the Tea Party is the fact that people said, not with my health care you don't, not with my money you don't, because we know today that we're looking at, for families, an increase in costs of $20,000 a year. That will be the cost that we're told for health insurance policies for the average family. That's a tax. That's a tax. When the federal government can tell you, just because you breathe, you have to buy a product or service because government tells you, and government tells you what that product or service is, that's a tax. And we're here to say, we're Americans. We're free people. We're not going to stand for that. We're going to keep fighting until it's gone. So with that, we'll open up your question.
What are you going to do if the Supreme
Go ahead.
Yesterday, Paul Ryan released his budget, part of which would repeal Obamacare. Do you guys see yourself supporting the Ryan budget?
We see our purpose here is to talk about the health care bill. We fully support Paul Ryan. backing the repeal of Obamacare. We think that's the right way to go. We've got to go in the direction of getting our sanity in our government. And there's one headline that we should not forget, and that was in this last month in the House Budget Committee when Tim Geithner was testifying before the committee. This was the government's own numbers, the CBO, that said that effectively in 15 years, our economy will shut down. That's how much debt we're in right now. We should tell that story over and over again. And this bill, Obamacare, will lead to that demise faster than anything. Because when the president is calling for a sequestration of $1 trillion, in other words, cut $1 trillion out of defense and out of domestic programs, we could solve that sequestration problem. Just don't implement the 2 new entitlement programs that Obamacare creates, which will cost $1 trillion that we don't have. So pretty soon, the people that we have to borrow money from are going to say no, because all we're doing is building up a bigger modern welfare state that we can't afford.
Every time we ask Democrats about repealing the health care bill, they cite popular parts provisions like letting kids stay on your insurance up to 26, closing the donut hole for seniors, is that denying denying insurance companies the right to deny your insurance on a pre-existing condition. Are those items that you think should also be repealed?
Step number 1 is the full-scale repeal of Obamacare. It has to go, not just parts, the whole bill has to go. From there, we can build up a modern, great American health care system. And to do that, we want to invigorate the free markets. What we want to do is allow every American to buy any insurance policy anywhere in the United States. We want them to have that freedom. We want people to buy health insurance with their own tax-free money. We want to have true medical malpractice reform. That will drive the cost of health care down. That's the real problem in health care, is cost. Cost is what keeps people from accessing high-quality care. If we can address the cost drivers, we'll solve this problem, and the rest will follow from there. Yes, ma'am.
Hi. Can you tell me what you expect to happen in the Supreme Court, and what if the Supreme Court does not strike down Obamacare?
No one knows what will happen in the Supreme Court. That will be up to the justices, but this is a very small world over the Supreme Court. And it says something that the White House were the ones that wanted to encourage the Supreme Court to take this matter up. We're legislators. We believe in the voice of the people. That's why we're here. This is not an issue that should be decided by the court. This is an issue that should be decided by the legislators, and we need to be the ones to pass the repeal bill. That's why elections matter, and that's why this fall we need a new president, we need a new Senate, so that we can fully repeal this bill through the proper channels, the Congress and at the White House, and finally have high-quality health care.
I think we should think about it in these terms, and that is that the court will make its decision. In the state of Ohio, they had a special election several months ago. Initiative number 2 was the repeal of the collective bargaining that had been signed into law by Governor Kasich. He lost that in a union-heavy turnout, 61%. But the third initiative was amending the Ohio Constitution to protect them from the individual mandate, which is the core of Obamacare and which the court will be hearing on. 66% of a union-heavy turnout voted to amend the Ohio Constitution. I will say this, that if the Supreme Court should find this unconstitutional, which I believe is the appropriate decision, then we still need to repeal Obamacare to follow through on that. But I think then that there's more risk that President Obama will be reelected because people will think they're protected from this egregious reach into our freedom. If the Supreme Court finds it constitutional, then I believe Barack Obama will not be reelected because they will understand that they have to vote him out of office to repeal it. So the bottom line is this, that if Barack Obama is not reelected, we will repeal this and we'll get it through the Senate and the House and put it on the desk of the next President of the United States. And I want to do it, West Portico of the Capitol, January 20th, 2013, and I want them to sign it, the repeal right there.
The day that this passed, or the night that this passed into law, and when we found out that the Stupak, however many it was, were caving, we promised the people who were standing out there, who had been out there for 18 hours on Saturday, got back on Sunday morning for a prayer service, and then we're here until 11:30, 12 o'clock at night. We promised him that we would leave absolutely no stone unturned and that we would be sure that this was repealed. We've repealed constitutional amendments, which require a much higher standard to repeal. This law will be repealed one way or the other. And if the Supreme Court rules that this is unconstitutional, what does that tell you about the people in this building? They were willing to vote and pass something that went against the will of the majority of Americans. And if the Supreme Court finds it unconstitutional, that was completely unconstitutional. They were willing to do that. If they're willing to do that with something that is so blatantly what the American people do not want, what else can they slide in when we're not paying attention?
The President said he was a uniter, not a divider. This is the most divisive bill that we've had in decades. This pits Americans against seniors, stripping, as Michelle said, $500 billion away from Medicare, and they want to say they care about seniors. This strips away rights of those who don't want to pay for abortion because there are abortions that will be funded. This does allow illegal people that are here illegally in America to get health care under this bill, and others pay for it. It is a divisive bill, and just one thing, this is unconstitutional. Now, if the Supreme Court wants to find that our Constitution is living and breathing, then what it will say is it's barely breathing. And we certainly need judges who recognize that it is a stable document, it means what it says, and it means no president, no matter how big the bill is, should have the right to invade your dining room, your kitchen, your bedroom, and every parts of your life as this does. It's all got to go. Any way we can get rid of it.
Any other questions? Thank you for coming. We appreciate you coming. Thank you.
Thank you.